So I used to have tons of little paranormal experiences up until I turned 18. And then they just stopped. And nothing for nearly 20 years. But then about 6 months ago, I started getting super interested in the paranormal again. And I'm always reading people's experiences on here or listening to a podcast. And things have started to happen again. I believe the more attention you give to the paranormal, even indirectly by reading about others' experiences, can give them enough energy to interact with you. Some backstory before I get into my latest happenings. I started dating my ex-wife in 2009. We moved into our house in 2010-11. Her family owned it before us, so she grew up in it basically. They always believed there was a presence in the house, but apart from a dumb teenage girl moment with a friend claiming to be a sensitive or another girl claiming to see something, no real experiences ever happened. But as adults, when we moved in, we always sensed something here. Not really malevolent, but powerful enough of a presence to put you, and sometimes also company, uneasy. But for literally a decade, zero actual experiences. Nothing unexplainable, even when talking about the paranormal, and even making jokes and trying to stir something out of sheer curiosity. Then, in 2020, we separated and I moved out. In this new place, I sometimes feel a small presence. I chalk it up to either imagination or maybe there's someone watching over me. So, who really knows what's there? Which we can't even see. We can only speculate. Now cut to 6 months ago, when I started to get super drawn to the paranormal again, and I began reading people's stories again, like every night in bed as I'm laying down to sleep. There was a story I shared with you all before about my experience with the Black Horseman, and I mentioned how it seemed to, as I call it, stir shit up, as in, if you give them attention, they feed off that energy enough to actually interact with you somehow. And now it seems like the same thing is happening all over again. I'm starting to feel a presence, much stronger. Weird, for sure. But let me continue with the story. Around October, I got a new experience. I was in a basement bedroom, only 2 floors. The stairs are loud. You can always hear them, even over the TV or music. Even when you try to be sneaky, they're just so damn loud. On one morning, around 6:18, I remember exactly because my morning ritual is to wake up before any other roommate, get dressed, and relax on my couch playing on my phone until 6:30 when I walk out to leave for work. All before any of my roommates wake up for their routine. So I'm in my room sitting on my couch, looking at my phone waiting on time to leave. Dead silence in the entire house. Sitting on the couch in my room, facing my open bedroom door, I hear the loud creaky stairs as something slowly walks down to the basement. All 13 steps. I think this is kinda strange, as I watch the doorway into the hall. There's no reason for anyone upstairs to come down here. They have their own bathroom up there, and nobody gets up before me. But I think maybe it's a roommate coming to talk to me before I leave. I then wait about 1 to 2 minutes. No sounds. No lights turn on or off. And then I hear the same loud steps going back upstairs. Then, this is the weird part. If anyone is walking upstairs, I hear them. At all times, the floor is so loud and creaky. So if someone goes upstairs, you always hear what they walk to afterwards also. But this time, there's silence after the footsteps go up, which is impossible. I even tested it with a roommate later that day. Also, when I came home, I told each roommate if they were up during that time frame, but they weren't. I did everything in my power to explain it away, but there is zero logic to disprove it. I tried. Here's my next experience. Me and my ex-wife are still friends. She's still in our old house, and we're getting ready to sell it and move to another state. She's moving to a new state with a new boyfriend, and I will be moving to my home state. So we decided, since her roommates are moving out, and we have to work on the house to get ready to sell it, I figured I would move back in, since I would be there so often anyway, and we get along well enough. Immediately, the presence in the house is stronger than I had ever felt before. Every night, I'm still reading and listening to stories and to a podcast in bed. Getting very creeped out, dumb and brave, I continue anyway. One evening, I go with my ex-wife to help do some janitorial service at a church for a mutual friend who she helps out for some side cash. She's been doing so for months, and she asked if I wanted to come along this time because she hates going there alone, because she thinks it's haunted and gets spooked out. There is this specific room she hates and feels like there's always a presence in that room, and it makes her extremely uneasy. A friend was hanging out with us and decided to tag along with us. So the three of us get there, and she tells me to handle that room because I don't rattle easily. So she's in the bathrooms. The friend is just standing in the hall talking to us, and I'm in the hall running a cord, and I walk past the door to that specific room. I looked at our friend as he turns completely white and says as I walk past it, the door slowly opened, even though I had just asked the ex-wife to come unlock it for me so I could vacuum it, so I know for a fact it was just locked. Take that as you will, just a door coming unlatched or paranormal. But it felt unlikely, it just unlatched, as it is a heavy solid built door with a sturdy lock. They lock every door in the church for whatever reason. Anyway, I tried recording some audio in the room alone a couple of times hoping to catch something, but I have captured nothing so far. I'll keep trying whenever I get a chance. I also say whenever I leave, you are not allowed to follow us home or attach yourself to us, and you are not allowed to feed off our energy before we leave the church every time. Here's my third experience. On the first week of December, my ex-wife has gone out of town with her new boyfriend, leaving me alone in the house for a couple of months. A buddy of mine who is pretty sensitive to spirits and such is visiting, and we end up talking about the paranormal, and I bring up the strong presence here which has felt much stronger since being alone. He also mentions that he felt something watching us from the kitchen the whole time that evening, and nervously changed the subject. That night, I go to bed, read some stories here, get all spooked, and get sleepy, put my phone on the charger, turn off the lights, and lay down. I'm still very much awake after only about a minute or two since turning off the lights, when I feel something on the bed next to my foot. This feeling, it feels like someone took their open palm and just firmly patted the bed. I know I'm alone in this house. There's no way it was a person. So I calmly said, "Do not mess with me while I am in bed, and you are not allowed to feed off my energy, and please respect my home and my boundaries." I try not to freak out as I tuck the blanket under my body as if it was a shield and would protect me, and I eventually went to sleep. After this third experience, and after that night, I don't read spookies every night anymore. All this shit needs to calm down until I'm at least not home alone. But here I am, typing this at midnight when I should actually be going to sleep, and I should mention that I'm still home alone. So I guess we'll see if I have another one to report soon. I don't know my birthday. The date on my ID card, July 3rd, 1922, was invented by an Army enlistment officer. When I told him that I didn't know how old I was, I'm sure my mom knew, but she died before I could ask her. I would imagine it was written down in the family Bible, but that was destroyed in the fire. As for my pa, I don't recall him ever being sober enough to remember, if he ever knew at all. Never got no cakes or presents growing up. I don't think I'm over 100, but regardless, I don't have much time left. There's a story that I need to tell before I pass on. A story from when I was very young. I better start at the beginning. I was born in the Smoky Mountains on the Tennessee-North Carolina border, in a place called Blackberry Hollow. I was the youngest of 3 children. Had a brother named Jack and a sister named Mabel. Would have been more children, but my mom died giving birth to her 4th, along with the baby, a girl named Sarah. We had a small farm, about 40 acres or so, planted corn mainly, along with some turnip, potatoes, and greens. Kept a few hogs and dairy cows too. Weren't prosperous by any means, no one in the valley was. Wasn't easy farming on account of the rocky soil, but we did alright. Not from farming, my pa was too drunk most of the time to properly tend to his fields, but he did tend his still, hidden back on an isolated mountaintop, so no revenuer would ever find it. Lived about 3 miles from the town center. Wasn't much of a town. 2 churches, one a missionary Baptist church, and the other a primitive Baptist church. Which one we went to depended on the fancies of the woman my pa was currently courting. Couldn't tell you the differences between the 2. The sermons always seemed to be about the various reasons you were going to hell for eternity. There was also a general store, which I never stepped foot in, best I can recollect. Didn't learn how to read and write till much later. And that was it for the town. As I said, it wasn't much. The town is now long gone. The government bought it up to form the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Heard that some of the buildings survive. Can't confirm that. Never been back to check. And never will, after what happened there. Now, as you can probably imagine, there wasn't no doctor in the town. The nearest would have been a good 30 miles away in the county seat. That would be a day's journey at least, over narrow mountain roads. No one had any cars in the valley back then, for even if they could afford them, there was no way for them to traverse the rocky path. So what you did when you were ill was go see the witch, Ma McDermott. Now, Ma McDermott looked like a hag from a fairy tale. She was nothing but skin and bones, her skin so thin and pulled so taut that it looked like her skull would burst through at any moment. Her bony fingers seemed to be twice the length of a normal man's and were capped with long, pointy, yellow nails. She walked stooped over, with the help of a hickory stick nearly twice her height. Strangest of all were her eyes, pale yellow like a daffodil. It was rumored that she was over 200, and I believed it. She had a small shack back in the woods behind the general store. Here she saw her patients. She could set a fracture, dispense a herbal remedy for morning sickness or the ague, and rub a salve on a burn. She knew some midwifery. In many ways, she was like the hundreds of other folk healers who practice in the mountain towns. But she was rumored to have a dark secret. There was an abandoned grist mill deep in the woods, probably about 5 miles from the family farm. It was said that there, Ma McDermott practiced black magic, seance with evil spirits, and even called forth the devil. All of the children of the hollow knew to avoid that place. My pa, who given his near constant state of inebriation, didn't teach me much of nothing, warned me multiple times to avoid the old mill, and I listened until one night. It all started the day my brother Jack died. Believe it was March, for I remember the fields were aflame, the farmers burning them to clear out the weeds and debris prior to the first planting. Jack and I were playing hide and seek. I was still counting down when I heard screams coming from the silo. I ran over and saw Jack up to his waist in grain, his arms flailing, being sucked down like it was quicksand. A few seconds later, he was completely submerged. My pa told me to run to a neighboring farm to get some help. He, along with 3 other men, spent hours scooping out the corn until they pulled out my brother. His body looked so peaceful, like he was asleep. But even as a young boy, no more than 5 or 6, I knew he was dead. I never recall seeing my pa cry, but he was clearly grieving. He became catatonic, lying in bed all day, not getting up except to get more whiskey. It was up to Mabel and me to feed the hogs, milk the cows. We should have been plowing, getting ready to plant, but we were too young to do that by ourselves. Finally, about a week after the accident, my pa finally got up. I remember riding into town, dressed all in black. I don't remember the service, but I remember the burial. As the preacher man was reading some psalm, I heard footsteps behind me. I looked behind and saw Mom McDermott standing right behind me, grinning from ear to ear like a mad woman. Before I could scream, she vanished into the thin air. Later that afternoon, I decided to go fishing, hoping to get the image of the witch out of my mind. Just had a little bamboo pole, but I was determined to catch a nice big rainbow trout and bring it home for dinner, hoping that it would cheer Pa up. I fished for hours, going downstream further than I ever had. All I got was a few nibbles. I sat back empty-handed, taking what I thought was a shortcut through the woods. The darkness snuck upon me, and I soon realized I was hopelessly lost. The temperature was dropping rapidly, as it does in the mountains, and I had on just a thin coat. I kept walking aimlessly, praying that I would find my way, when in the distance, I saw a little bit of golden light. I ran towards it. As I got closer, I realized it was an old mill, the big water wheel having split right into 2. Freezing, I began to run to the door, when what I saw through one of the windows stopped me in my tracks. Propped up in a chair was my brother. The top of his skull cleanly sliced off and set down on a long wooden table in front of him. Also, in the table were various vats containing chemicals of different colors, copper wires running between them. Floating in one of them was a brain. Presiding over this macabre spectacle was Ma McDermott. I tried to run, but my body was paralyzed. I watched Ma McDermott remove the brain and set it back into my brother's skull. Nothing happened for several seconds. But then, suddenly, my brother's eyes opened wide. But they weren't his eyes. They were demon eyes. Devil eyes. Somehow, they radiated evil. Pure evil. Ma McDermott looked up at me. The same grin on her face that she had at the burial. She started cackling. I ran. I didn't know which direction I was headed. I just ran. Away from the mill. Away from the witch. I kept running, even though my legs had long ago given out. Even though my heart was pounding harder than I knew it could. Never once looked behind me, for I knew I would see the witch riding her hickory stick, cackling, grinning from ear to ear. Eventually, after what seemed like hours, I came out onto the main road that led from the town to my farm. I didn't take a rest, but kept running, all the way back to the farm. My sister was at the door, crying. I hugged her for the last time and went upstairs and tried to wake my pa, but he was passed out from the drink. I told my sister that Mom McDermott was after us, what I saw, but she didn't believe me and went to bed. I made sure that all the doors and windows were locked and got my pa's hunting rifle out. I sat by the front door, the gun, which would have been too heavy for me to aim, resting on my lap. I must have fallen asleep, for I awoke to my pa shaking me. He picked me up and rushed us outside before running back in for my sister. As I sat in the cold night air, I saw, from the light of the burning house, a figure walking stiffly towards the pines, moving like he was hewn from wood. In his right hand was a torch, still ablaze. Despite the distance, I knew who it was, my brother. A few seconds later, I saw my pa running outside, carrying the body of my sister. She was dead. My pa said it was a rival moonshiner who set his house alight, but I knew the truth. I never told him. If he lived longer, I might have, but he took his life a few weeks later. I watched him walk outside calmly one morning, carrying a rifle. I watched as he put it in his mouth and pulled the trigger. I was sent to live with one of my pa's brothers, who was the foreman at a textile mill in Asheville. For years, I had nightmares that Mom McDermott, or my brother, or what was once him, would show up in the night at my window to snatch me away, but they never came. For my whole life, I have wondered what was Mom McDermott doing with my brother's corpse, what her motive was. I have never come up with any satisfactory answers. I just hope that when my time comes, I will be in heaven with my ma and pa, with Jack and Mabel and little Sarah. I pray every day that I will not end up in hell with the devil and with Mom McDermott, the witch of Blackberry Hollow.